Really excited to be with you guys this morning and to share my heart about something that I'm actually really passionate about related to the series that Danny started last week called Missionary. I'm going to begin by telling just a little bit of my story and tie it in with the first part of the mission statement of Port City Church, which is reaching people. Reaching people. So even though I was born in Raleigh, North Carolina, just a few years ago, I actually spent most of my growing up years in Pamlico County, or as the locals like to refer to it, down the county, or DC. If you don't get out of Craven very much or you're new to this area, it's actually the next county contiguous to Craven, east, okay? Pamlico County has some great hunting, fishing, sailing grounds. They have some awesome fresh local seafood if you haven't checked it out. And they also have these mosquitoes that are about the size of a small commuter plane. But it's a great place. It's a beautiful place. And I had a wonderful time growing up in Pamlico County. It was really kid-friendly. I could ride my bicycle around the neighborhood without anybody bothering me. I could ride down to the sandy beach of the Neuse River and go for a swim. That's when you could actually swim in the Neuse River. I remember fishing from my grandparents' rowboat in the little pond in their backyard. And I also remember going to school, elementary school, with about the same 12 to 15 students from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. So they knew the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we were friends, and it was so fun. I want you guys to think back for just a minute. I mean, some of you are younger in here, so you don't have to think back far. Others of you maybe have to think back a little farther. But think about what you wanted to be when you were a kid, when you grew up. Okay, so just think about that. What did you want to be when you grew up? Some of you may be still trying to figure that out, I don't know. But when I was a kid, the first thing that I remember wanting to be when I grew up was a teacher. Okay, I actually was one of the nerds in school that liked learning, and I love my teachers. I remember all my teachers, like from my elementary years. I also had teachers on both sides of my family, and so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a teacher. And I remember I had all these stuffed animals, much to my mom's chagrin. I would line them up in the summer especially, all along the wall. And I had a little brother named Lee, who's now 6'5", but back then I could boss him around because he was smaller than me. And so I made him pass out all the papers to the stuffed animals. I would make him take them to the bathroom. I would make him pick up all the papers. And he always said I was bossy. I don't know why he said that. I'd just call it leadership, wouldn't you? But anyway, so I would do that, and I even remember like counseling my stuffed animals because they had problems. Okay, so I wanted to be a teacher. But then as time went on, I kind of fell a little out of love maybe with that process and fell in love with science. So then I thought to myself, I love science. I want to help people heal their ailments, and so I want to be a doctor. Okay, these are the typical things that kids like to do, except be Spider-Man maybe. But anyway, so I set my sights on being a doctor. I went off to college and I got really deep into organic chemistry, semester 1 and semester 2. Inorganic chemistry, semester 1, semester 2. Physics, semester 1, semester 2. Calculus, you get the idea. And I thought there must be something more fun and a better way to help people than spending 100 years in school. Plus, I spent a summer at the hospital volunteering, and there were just a lot of strange sounds and funny smells. I just didn't. So anyway, I had taken a psychology class in school, and I fell in love with studying the human mind and human behavior. So now when I'm looking at you, that's what I'm doing. I'm studying you. But I took every psychology class that I could find, and I majored in it, and I really fell in love with it. Now, growing up, I actually lived in a family that did a lot of volunteering in the community. It seems like I was always being dragged to this meeting to help people in the community, or this meeting to help people, or doing fundraisers to help this local charity. And so I grew up in a family that really had a core belief of giving back to the community. They still actually really do. So I enjoyed helping people, and my first job out of college or grad school was not a teacher. It was not a doctor. It was something a lot more obscure. I actually worked for a community foundation, and what that did was people who had wealth worked with us to be able to give that wealth to charities. And so what I was able to do is connect millionaires, most of the time, with people who were in charities and just help them connect with each other. So I was able to do this. Tens of millions of dollars got to be planted in the community, and I loved that. I loved working with the millionaires. Most of them, believe it or not, had really raggedy clothes and drove station wagons. Go figure. And then, but they were so generous, and I also loved working with the awesome people who ran the homeless shelters and did the after-school programs. And I could talk to, if you know me well, you know I can talk to anybody. I can actually probably talk to a post. And so I didn't see those folks as any different. I could talk to any of them. And so as time went on, I fell in love with that. Well, after I did work for the Community Foundation, I actually got the opportunity to work for Port City Church as a host team coordinator. That was an awesome experience, being able to work with Danny and Chad and Jonathan and my friend Sue, who's back there, helping connect people to our church and loving on and, just getting volunteers for the church. So I did that. After that, I was actually called to be a principal of a Christian school in the area. So I was able to really love on kids and families for about 5 years. And I'm almost done with this story. And then I felt called. It sounds like I've had a lot of different jobs, but I had 3 amazing boys, and so I was kind of looking after them the whole time of doing that. What the Lord has called me to most recently is being a child custody mediator in the court system, serving Pamlico, Craven, and Carteret counties. And so almost on a daily basis, I am facilitating conversations, tough conversations, very emotionally charged conversations, usually between 2 people who have been very hurt by each other. But it's an honor to do that. Now, when I tell people what I do, you can imagine the look on their face like, oh, why would anybody in their right mind want to be involved in somebody's custody dispute? But you know what? I've heard a lot of hurtful things. I've heard a lot of betrayal of trust in the things that I've heard. But I've also seen these glimmers of forgiveness, and I've seen these glimmers of hope for healing, and I'm able to help children for their future, and it just really brings me so much joy, even in the midst of all that hurt. And in those moments, I realize that I'm doing what I feel called to do, which is reach people right where they are. So Danny kicked off a series last week called Missionary. He talked about how missionaries are not just people who go to foreign countries and travel and share the gospel, but then in essence, missionaries are simply people who are called to carry out a mission or a special or important assignment. At the end of the Gospel of Matthew in the New Testament, Jesus commands believers to go and make disciples of all nations. That's not just foreign nations, that's all nations, including our own nation. And what this entails, this making disciples, is really encouraging and leading others to Jesus so that Jesus can form us and form our hearts and to be and live and operate in his kingdom. Interestingly, his kingdom is very different and very countercultural from ours. But that's what we're called to do. You know, my husband and I actually spent about a week working in an orphanage. It's not that long, but we worked in an orphanage in Juarez, Mexico. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's right across the Texas-El Paso border, and there's a lot of crime there. But we went and had the opportunity to serve in an orphanage. As I think back on that, I can tell you this. Serving as a missionary there was not nearly as difficult as serving as a missionary here. In the four walls of our homes, where people can push our buttons or know how to aggravate us, that's the tough part of serving as a missionary. It's serving as a missionary in the Walmart line when two people ahead of you have a toddler that is really holding up the process of checking out and you have got somewhere you need to be. Being a missionary is reaching people right here in our community, fixing a meal for somebody when you can hardly even get it together to fix a meal for yourself, but they've had surgery and they need your love. That's what a missionary looks like. What a missionary looks like is seeing somebody in the cereal aisle at Food Lion and they're pouring out their heart because you happen to ask them how they're doing. And instead of saying fine, which is what most of us say, they actually start telling you a challenge. And being a missionary is praying for them right on the spot, right by the raisin bran, because you and I both know that when we say, I'll pray for you later, or I'll pray for you, that when we leave, sometimes it just leaves our mind. That's what a missionary looks like. The bottom line is that we're called to be missionaries where we live and where we work and where we play. And how do we do that? What is our mission really? I'm so glad you asked me, right? Our mission is to reach people. Now you may be sitting there saying, but Jennifer, I don't even like people. Like this picture behind me, see that up there? That scares me. That's Mumfest. That's a lot of people. People drive me crazy. All right, well, I can tell for some of you guys that's not a far drive to crazy. I can tell you that. But you may also be saying to yourself, well, I can tell that this girl up on the stage is a people person, right? And that's definitely not me. You're probably thinking my happy place is in my pajamas, under my favorite blanket, in my favorite chair at home, right? I admit I'm a people person. I wake up in the morning with people on my mind, and I love trying to figure out like what makes people tick and why they think the way they do. But you don't really have to be a people person to reach people. In fact, technically, you can't even use that as an excuse. And you want to know why? Because Jesus' main mission was to reach people. Have you ever thought about the fact that the whole New Testament, even some of the old, but when we see the stories of Jesus, what is he doing? He's hanging out with people. He didn't come to this earth to earn a bunch of money. That's not what it says. He didn't come to this earth to create some sort of gadget. He didn't come to this earth to try and get some fancy educational degree. He didn't even come for political leadership. Why did he take on human form? It was for people. And what do we see him doing with people in the Gospels, in the New Testament? He's talking to people. He's hanging out with people. He's eating with people. He's teaching people. He's dealing with people, everyday people like you and me with hang-ups and issues and bad reputations. And what was he doing? He was there speaking life. He was speaking freedom. He was speaking love. He was speaking healing to all of these people. He was not standing there judging them, not the ones he was reaching, but he was loving them. So why in the world would we think that we're called to do anything different because we are supposed to be like him? In fact, the whole Bible, if you think about it, is God's plan for humanity. When we look in the scriptures, one of the chapters that I really like in Matthew chapter 9, so if you look at it, it lists all of these incidents in kind of rapid fire motions where Jesus is talking and working with people. And this is actually how it gets started. And getting into a boat, he, Jesus, crossed over and came to his own city. Well, after that, this is what we see, and I'm going to read it. In verses 1 through 8, Jesus heals a paralyzed man. In verses 9 through 13, he's calling Matthew, the tax collector, to come and follow him. And the religious leaders are standing to the side being really critical that he's hanging out with a sinner. In verses 14 through 17, Jesus is eating with his disciples. The religious leaders are criticizing the fact that they're not fasting. So obviously Jesus hung out with people who ate too much. I can appreciate that. Then in verses 18 through 26, a woman with a chronic disease is healed by Jesus, and he also raises a little girl from the dead. Next, we see Jesus healing 2 blind men. And then close to the end of that chapter 9, we see that Jesus heals a man who can't speak, and then he does. And all of these things lead to the last couple of verses in Matthew chapter 9. It's going to be on the screen, and I really want you to hone in on Jesus' heart for people. This is what it says. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field." Now, I don't know if you guys subscribe to Port City's daily devotionals. If you don't, I would really encourage you to. You can go on the website, put in your email address, and it'll send it to your email, or you can check it out on our app. But this past Monday, I was reading it, and it broke down this word compassion, okay? There's a Greek word, and I'm a Southern girl, so I'm probably going to butcher this. But this Greek word for compassion, you can see it on the screen. I'm going to attempt it. Splagchnozomai. Splagchnozomai. Do you guys want to say it too? Come on. Here, let me hear it. Splagchnozomai. Did you sneeze? All right. Well, in this word actually refers to this strong emotion that somebody feels really deep inside their core, in their gut. And it means to be moved so that it causes this reaction of love and empathy. So this is very interesting. In ancient Greece, people believed that love and compassion actually lived in the gut, not the heart. Okay? So we, of course, say that we love someone with our whole heart. Well, they would typically probably say they loved someone with their whole stomach. Okay? For us, that sounds really strange. We just had Valentine's Day, and I'm sure you didn't give the love of your life candy in the shape of a stomach. Okay? But in Greece, in the Greek, which is what this is written in as far as compassion, they actually felt love and compassion deep inside their core. Okay? Even though that might seem a little weird, I think we can appreciate how emotions are connected to the tummy. Have you guys ever seen someone and gotten butterflies in your stomach? Or have you ever had to speak in front of a crowd and felt a little queasy on your stomach or anxious like in your pit? Okay, well, Jesus, this is what he felt really deep in his core when he was looking at the crowds. And he had such deep love and compassion for them. You know what? In turn, we're supposed to be that same way. We're supposed to be that same way. And what is the harvest in these verses that we read? The harvest is people who need to know that Jesus loves them. The harvest is people that are reaching for something. You and I both know that there are people all around us that are reaching for something. Okay? And who are the workers that Jesus talked about? We are those workers in the vineyard. Now, reaching people, okay, it's an action-oriented, proactive kind of phrase, okay? So I just want you guys to join me in this little exercise. If you haven't exercised today, this is going to count. You can check it off your list and go on. All right, I want you to stick out your arms, if you feel comfortable, and reach towards the person in front of you, but don't touch them. Just reach. They might freak out if you touch them. They might get slapped. Okay, I mean like now do it again and really stretch. Oh, y'all look amazing. Okay, you put your arms down. Reaching people, it's an action. Like we have to be proactive, and guess what? It stretches us, literally and figuratively. Reaching people is uncomfortable. It makes us feel vulnerable sometimes. It takes our most precious commodity, I would say that's time, because we cannot get it back. Reaching people takes our second most precious commodity, and I would say that's probably money, because it's really hard to come by sometimes. And working with people and reaching people is messy, right? People are messy. Some of you are messier than others. And all of us have been hurt by people. I'm sure there's not a single person in here that has not been hurt by somebody or been betrayed by somebody. We're skeptical. People are going to take advantage of us, right? And we're guarded. We have trust issues. And so when I'm saying reach people, that can cause some tension. But you know what? It's actually all about getting in someone's boat, all right? Stepping in somebody else's boat. And what I mean by that is going to where they're living, getting into what they're dealing with, getting in close proximity to someone and the issues that they're facing. That's all about stepping in somebody else's boat. You know, Jesus did that a good bit, like literally and figuratively. One of my favorite stories in the Bible comes from Luke chapter 5, where we're introduced to this dude named Simon, who's later called Peter, and Jesus encourages him to be a disciple. So Simon is out and he's a fisherman for a living, and he's not catching any fish. And he is in panic mode. Sees Jesus walking. Jesus steps in the boat right near him in his time of greatest need and says, "Throw your nets over again." Who does this guy think he is? I've been a fisherman all my life. But Simon is curious. He trusts Jesus. He lowers his nets. And for those of you who know the story, what happens? So full of fish, a fisherman's dream, that he can't even pull the nets back up. Okay, what did Jesus do? He stepped in his boat. And he did that first, and then he called Simon to come and follow him. So what this looks like is us taking that uncomfortable step to get in somebody else's boat. And then I love this because later in those verses, this is what it says, and this is a message for us too. Jesus says to Peter, do not be afraid. From now on, you'll be catching men. Or as our mission statement says, reaching people. So back to the devotional that I was talking about. I want to put a little segment of it on the screen so that we can read it, because it actually punched me in the gut when I read it. It says this: being moved with compassion always leads in the direction of others. We need to see people the way Jesus saw them and feel the same level of compassion that Jesus displayed. We see people who might not look like us, think like us, behave like us, or even believe like us, and we respond to them with gut-level love. We look at the world's brokenness, not with bitterness, judgment, and I'm speaking to myself because it is so easy to judge people. We don't look with anger or irritation, but with compassion that compels us to humble action. Loving others takes guts. Now, reaching people comes with a little bit of a warning or a caveat, and I'm going to get really vulnerable here. Reaching people can be exhausting, particularly if you're doing it from a wounded heart. And that was really me. See, from the time I was a little girl, I was definitely a people pleaser. I wanted people to like me. I wanted people to accept me. I had been broken by somebody else's addiction, and I wanted to fix things. I wanted to be strong for people. I wanted to be there. I reached hard for people, and I was so excited when they reached back for me. I felt needed. I prided myself on being accessible to everybody that needed me. My life quote used to be, true life is found in giving your life away. True life is found in giving your life away. I quoted it. I put it on my Facebook page as my lifelong quote. I tried desperately to live it out. I found myself, again, reaching constantly for people. But that's when I sacrificed my time with the Lord. I sacrificed my time with my amazing husband, Frankie. I sacrificed my time with my wonderful boys, all in the name of reaching people and giving my life away. And in the process, I lost myself. My marriage began to crumble, and the enemy tried really hard to snag me into losing my faith and basically everything that was really precious to me. And I don't say that just flippantly, almost everything. So I had to change my way of thinking when I almost hit rock bottom and lost it all. There are these words that Jesus speaks, and I've always been familiar with the first part of this verse, but I've never really seen the second part. It's from Mark 8:36 and 37, and this is Jesus saying, "And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul?" And then this was the part I didn't see. Jesus says, "Is anything worth more than your soul?" We can get so busy trying to save people that we lose our own souls. And that's not what Jesus intended. Jesus spent time away to refuel. He connected with his Father. He had really healthy boundaries. I know that's a word we throw around a lot, but he did. He had healthy boundaries. I mean, he offered love to people. He did everything he could to draw them to the Father. But if they chose to reject it, he moved on and he let it go. And so he had these healthy boundaries of allowing people to make choices. He didn't really pander. You don't see him begging. He offered the truth, and he offered freedom, And if they didn't accept it, then he moved on in his mission. He never wavered from his mission. So having healthy boundaries when it comes to reaching people is really important, because there actually are people who will try to take advantage of us, whether they intentionally mean to or not. We really need to listen to the wisdom of the Holy Spirit when it comes to investing in and reaching other people, because we can get hurt. Sometimes when we help people, it actually hurts them. So we really need to be full of the Spirit's wisdom when we do that. And so instead of true life is found in giving your life away, really the better way to say that is probably the fullness of life is truly found when we empty our own cup. We can't fill everybody else's cup. Only Jesus can really do that. But when we empty ourselves, well, that's when we're reaching people, and then we need to seek the Father for being filled back up. If we try to do things out of our own measure, we're going to get empty and depleted. So we must live life by the power of the Holy Spirit. Only He can keep our cup filled. Despite these warnings, though, we cannot get away from the fact that Jesus showed love and compassion to all types of people. And He is calling us to do the same, to reach people. I'm going to actually invite the worship team, our awesome worship team, back up to the stage, because God put a song on Alyssa's heart this week that we want to share with you, that's a prayer about reaching people and the heart that we need to have. But if we're being gut level honest, I mean, how are we doing reaching people? Are we being stretched? Or are we happy to just live in our comfort zone underneath our blanket? Okay? Whose boat have you stepped in lately to get up close to where they're living? When's the last time you were truly moved to compassion for people who were harassed and helpless? Remember that verse? There are a lot of people in our world right now who are harassed and helpless. How are we doing with reaching people? How are we doing talking to the person behind us in the food line, grocery line? How are we doing really looking or seeing the person who's sitting beside us at the doctor's office? How are we doing chatting with the person who's sitting beside us on the airplane? I actually love that because it's a captive audience. How are we doing that? How are we doing reaching people? I mean, how are we doing reaching people and inviting them here to feel the same love and generosity and truth and freedom? How are we doing inviting people to come get in our boat too so that we can share that? I mean, who could you love on? When was the last time you got out of bed, fell on your knees, and asked God, who are you going to put in my path today that I can be a blessing to, that I can love on, that I can invest in, even if I have trust issues? Who are you calling me to love today? How are we doing with that? Are we really slowing down to see people? I mean, really see people. Because I've got an agenda. I got things I got to do. I have my to-do list, and then I have a to-do list for my to-do list. And I might pretend that I don't see you in the grocery store. I'm going to pretend I don't see you. Are we seeing people? I mean, really seeing them. And then, are we listening? I mean, really listening to people, because that's exactly what Jesus did while he was on the earth. And we're called to be like him. So as the team comes, I hope they're coming, I want us to all stand and really sing this song as a prayer, because that's what it is, and really, really let these words just soak into your heart. And if you feel called, even if it's awkward, if you're willing to just kind of reach out your arms during this song as obedience to what God is calling us to do, then I would invite you to do that. This song is called For the One.